Welcome, everybody. It is the end of June, which means everyone's angry with their weather, and we have another webinar for you today. I'm your host, Brad Ken, and we are so excited to bring you today's presentation. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. As you guys know, Vertical Measures was recently acquired by Investis Digital. So this will be the last webinar promoted through Vertical Measures. You'll still get the same notifications if you're signed up to our newsletter. It'll just be coming from Investis Digital officially starting next month. Moving on, today's webinar is titled How to Drive Leads and Maximize Revenue with Conversion Rate Optimization, and will be presented by our CRO experts, Zach Bramwell and Jeff Putnam. Zach is a total web dork. He has a Bachelor in Science degree from ASU in Graphic Information Technology with a focus in web design and development. Zach has worked within a wide range of web, from UX design to back-end web development. He loves data-driven design and usability solutions and considers himself to be a user's advocate. In his free time, Zach enjoys reading memoirs, watching thought-provoking films, and drinking copious amounts of coffee. Jeff, on the other hand, has a background in graphic design, web design, front-end development, and photography. So he's been involved in the internet marketing in some way, shape, or form over the last 8 years. User experience is Jeff's main area of focus as he strives to make the internet a better place. Good luck, Jeff. Nothing gets Jeff more excited than doing a deep dive into new clients, finding out about their industry, checking out the competition, and figuring out the best way to fulfill their users' needs. So before Zach and Jeff dive into their webinar, I do have a few notes to go over. This presentation will be available online tomorrow at verticalmeasures.com/webinars. We'll also shoot you an email tomorrow morning with that link. If you have any questions, shoot it over to us in the questions tab anytime throughout the webinar, and we'll try to run it by the crows during the Q&A section. Make sure you download our free full-color, now critically acclaimed book, The Customer Journey, at vert.ms/customer-journey. And finally, we know that your time is extremely valuable, but if you do have a minute or two after the webinar, we ask that you fill out our quick 5-question multiple choice survey. It really helps us when it comes to planning out future webinar topics and guests. So that's all for me. Let's please welcome Zach and Jeff.
Hi, everybody. So welcome to our webinar titled How to Drive Leads and Maximize Revenue with Conversion Rate Optimization. I originally argued for it to just be called Conversion Rate Nirvana, but this title won out. So before we get going, we just want to give you a brief introduction to ourselves beyond what Brad said. Thank you for that wonderful intro. I'm Zach Bramwell. I'm the CRO and UX strategist here at Vertical Measures, an Investis digital company. And yes, my hair is that glorious in person.
And I'm Jeff Putnam, the other CRO strategist here. My hair also is that good in person.
So to start off today, we're going to give you an intro to conversion rate optimization, how work, what to do. So when I say I do conversion rate optimization or CRO, this is the look I usually always get along with the equations flying around the screen. I usually end up just saying, kind of for the purpose of shortening conversation, that I do web design and web development, but in reality, conversion rate optimization is so much more than that and involves so much more than that. So the definition we give here at Vertical Measures is that conversion rate optimization is the iterative process of improving a site's conversion funnel to derive the most value from its traffic. The most important part of that I really want to draw everyone's attention to is the word iterative. CRO is not a one and done thing. It's not something you do for a few months, stop, and then start again. It's an iterative process that's constantly moving and evolving and changing, and it's something that you really need to do long term to really reap the benefits of it. So we break CRO into kind of two different types or two different families of CRO. First one being on-site. So on-site is conversion rate optimization performed on a client's live organic site. So this would be something like www.verticalmeasures.com. And for this, we utilize A/B testing tools that we'll get into more later. And then this benefits all traffic sources. So if you have social traffic coming to your site, paid traffic coming to your organic site, as well as just all your organic search traffic, this type of testing benefits all of those audiences. Whereas the second type is off-site testing. So this is conversion rate optimization performed specifically on landing pages. And this utilizes whatever kind of landing page platform or A/B testing tool that you are operating within. Most of the kind of more front runner landing page tools have A/B testing built in, but some don't. Again, we'll kind of touch on that and the tools a little bit more later. But this specifically benefits promoted and paid traffic sources. Kind of a huge difference between on-site and off-site. On-site implementation is usually a bit harder, and there's usually a bit more of resistance, I'll use that word. A lot are kind of more hesitant to change their organic site and organic experience. Whereas offsite, you're able to iterate a lot faster due to high intent traffic. So oftentimes offsite and landing pages have a significantly higher conversion rate than your onsite, your organic site. And so that enables CRO and conversion rate optimization to test a lot faster and iterate a lot faster, especially just because of that heightened conversion rate. So throughout this presentation, most of what we'll be talking to is on-site, but important to keep in mind that both of these exist. So when I talk about A/B testing and conversion rate optimization, everyone thinks of the classic, let's change the color of the CTA. Let's change it from green to red and see how that lifts conversion rate. But in reality, conversion rate optimization and what we do is so much more than just looking at button color. And I'll be walking through just a few examples here, so bear with me. So one example of something we test is content. This is changes in headlines, changes in messaging, changes in the way a page is organized, so that you can really remove as much friction as possible from that experience. Another one is page design. So this is working to kind of increase legibility or changing different graphic elements on a page to enhance that experience and really persuade more users to be converting. Beyond that, interactive content. This, of course, as you can see from the icon, video is a huge example of that and works really well, especially on off-site testing, but can also involve quizzes and surveys and other chances for users to really interact with your brand directly. Next one is imagery. So this kind of falls in line with page design, but more specific, using imagery to appeal to a very specified audience. This is, again, especially successful with paid audiences where you really know the exact segment of people who are viewing this experience. ClickFunnels, so optimizing your ClickFunnel and how your site works and functions to optimize it and remove as much friction as possible. So taking something that might be 3 steps or take 3 clicks and 3 page loads and taking that down to 2 is a huge opportunity to lift conversion rate and engagement on all of those pages. Another one is social proof. So testimonials always perform great and are a great way to lift conversion rate and a great thing to test, especially video testimonials to really give that social proof of your brand and the value that you're providing. Another one is personalization. This is, again, super specific to offsite testing and landing pages where you really know that exact audience that's coming there. But as the web gets more and more sophisticated, users are expecting a further personalized experience. So anything that you can do to really cater to that individual person within a CRO test is super, super successful. So of course, calls to action. This is kind of the one that comes front of mind for a lot of people when thinking about CRO, but changing that call to action verbiage, the styling, yes, sometimes it really is just the button color that needs to be tested. Beyond that, forms. So I'm always an advocate for the lowest amount of form fields that you can do to still be getting a high quality lead. But also testing the way forms are displayed, whether it's placeholders versus labels, to increase usability as a CRO test to really see what your audience converts on and what your audience expects. Another one is trust factors. So along with social proofs, giving any other kind of trust factors to users, whether that be various awards that you've won or various kind of recognition that you have received within your industry. And then value propositions, of course, this is huge for offsite, really pushing the value that users will gain from either buying your product or filling out your form or subscribing to your newsletter or whatever that conversion point might be, really making that as succinct and straightforward as possible. And then last one that I'll highlight here, surveys. Even just having the option to give a survey really shows an increase of transparency with users and can help promote trust between a brand and its audience, but as well as then getting the qualitative data of that feedback and being able to apply that to your brand and use that to kind of further iterate on with CRO testing. So while I've kind of gone and talked through all of these briefly and quickly, I want to stress the importance of it's still so much more than this. There are so many other different things that you should be looking to test and continuing to test and iterate, and it really never ends. So now I'm going to actually toss it over to Jeff, and yeah, take it away.
Thanks for that, Zach. So I will be going over our CRO tools. It's okay to be a tool who uses tools. Skills, data, and tools. Oh my. So a CRO skill set is something that you need to have in order to do CRO. These aren't nice to haves, these are must haves. So we have attention to detail, really granular attention to detail, user empathy, being able to feel what the user feels, design fundamentals, a good graphic design, web design background is great to have, a UX background, knowing how websites work, how users interact with the website, how they should. Maths, we are now owned by a British company, so we say maths now. Technical skills such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and flexibility and humility. Humility is really important because you are going to fail. The industry standard is 66% of tests will fail. Here at VM, we are actually at 33% of our tests fail, so CRO data points that you're going to be looking at are things like heat mapping, that's seeing how users interact with your website, and we'll go over this a little bit later actually. A/B testing statistics such as conversion rate and bounce rate and stuff like that. Web analytics, which you're going to get from Google Analytics, things like conversion tracking, conversion rate, conversion volume, page views, bounce rate, sessions, and exit rate. Some useful tools to have. We have highlighted the ones that we prefer in each of these sections. So heat mapping, such as Lucky Orange, Crazy Egg, Hotjar, and there are others out there, but like I said, we like Lucky Orange here. Analytics, you're pretty much going to be using Google Analytics. There's other analytics suites out there, but Google Analytics is pretty much the go-to. Landing page builders such as Instapage, Unbounce, and HubSpot. These are going to be the offsite testing tools that you use. We really like Unbounce for all the features that it has. A/B testing tools such as Convert.com, A/B Tasty, VWO, Google Optimize is a newer one out there, but we really like Convert. It's really difficult to Google things for Convert because it's just Convert. Why did you choose such a silly name, Convert? And you got your CRO, Moral Support Manager, that you're going to cry to when your tests lose. It's very important to have that. He's a good boy. Heat mapping. So it's very, very, very important. We really stress this to do heat mapping before A/B testing. We like to get this on sites as soon as possible. It's really easy to implement. It's not very expensive. There's really no reason that you shouldn't be heat mapping your users. Things that we can track with heat mapping are clicks, hovering, at least on desktop, and scroll depth. On mobile, you can't track hovering because that technology doesn't exist yet. You can't really see where somebody's finger's hovering over a phone. Other features that you can look at in your heat mapping are segmentation. So you can view heat maps segmented by where your user came from. They come from a paid ad, were they organic traffic, were they a referral from like Facebook, stuff like that. And you can also view session recordings, which are really cool. So you can kind of view a video recording of how a user browsed through your website. You can view page by page. You can see where their mouse moved on the site. You can tag these, so you only want to look at recordings that have a conversion. You can do that. It's great, at least in Lucky Orange, you can. So, and this is a Lucky Orange screenshot over here. We prefer Lucky Orange specifically because it has dynamic maps that allow you to load your map over an interactive version of your site. So that's really helpful when you say, so you have like a drop down in your menu. All the other heat mapping tools aren't going to be able to show you how people visually show you how people interacted with that drop down, whereas Lucky Orange, it loads up an actual interactive version of your website, so you can kind of browse through your website like you normally would. It just shows you heat mapping tools over the top of that. Another important thing to note about heat mapping tools is that they are an asynchronous script, so it doesn't slow down your page load at all, and that's something, you know, as CRO people that we really enjoy. So after you've done your heat mapping, now you can actually move on to A/B testing. So A/B testing is where you're going to send 50% of your users to your original page or your control, and you're going to send 50% of your users to another test page, which is your variant. And then we measure that performance of each page based on specific goals. So in our example here, we have Sophia from our book, which you can get from our website. She is either going to see our control, version A, or our variant, version B. Now, the way that this happens is with cookies. So like we prefer Convert. Convert will put a cookie on your computer, and that cookie will determine which version you see of this page anytime you go to this page. Now, with A/B testing, you can do more than just A/B. You can do A, B, C, D testing, you know, where you're splitting it between 25, 25, 25, 25. You can do many more, but most of our tests, I would say, we do A/B testing. There's also multivariate testing, which is a little bit more complex. You change multiple things on your site, and then users are shown some sort of combination of those, but we're not going to get into that. If you want to talk more about that, you can ask us about it later. And then the other set of tools that you're going to use is Google Analytics and Tag Manager. So Tag Manager is really great for tracking events on your page, and that's pretty much all I'll say about that. But Google Analytics is really your bread and butter here. So things that you're going to look at there are things like conversion rate, conversion volume. Conversion volume is really important to pay attention to, as other efforts such as SEO and paid traffic can impact your conversion rate. So say, for instance, you're doing SEO efforts for your site as well as CRO, that's going to increase your organic traffic. Now, that organic traffic usually isn't very high intent, so your conversion rate actually has a chance to go down. Even though you're doing testing to improve your conversion rate, you're getting more organic traffic, your conversion rate's probably going to go down. So it's important to pay attention to that conversion volume as well. Things like page views are great. It's helpful to figure out which pages you want to test on. You don't really want to do a test on a page that only has like 300 views in a month, because your test's going to go on forever. Sessions. Google measures conversion rate against sessions, not page views or users, so it's really important to pay attention to sessions. Some different conversion tools will utilize users or page views instead to track conversion rate, but it's important to note that Google Analytics goes off of sessions. So sometimes that conversion rate might always match up between your tools. Bounce rate, sometimes we use this as a goal actually, but it can also be affected by other tests. So sometimes we're trying to decrease bounce rate. Well, usually we're trying to decrease bounce rate. But bounce rate isn't always like a good metric to look at. If users are bouncing from a page, that might be a good thing. Same with exit rate. It might be a good thing if that is actually a conversion point of your website. Because users went to that page, they did what you wanted them to do, and then they left, which is great. And then pivot tables are another thing that I'd like to mention here in analytics. It's kind of a lesser known feature in Google Analytics, but I really love them. It's a great way to identify high and low performing audiences. That's actually what our screenshot is over here on the right. It's kind of difficult to read, but you can experiment with this in your own Google Analytics view. It'll be in those tools area where you see like you can switch to like a pie chart or a bar graph or something like that. It's the one all the way over on the right. So what it allows you to do is it does a deep dive, that's kind of our catchphrase with CRO, into things that you might not otherwise pay attention to. It allows you to pivot a primary dimension and a secondary dimension and 2 pivot metrics. So a quick example that we have here is that we use source medium as our secondary dimension, or as our primary dimension, and our secondary dimension is browsers. Then the metrics that we're looking at are users and goal conversion rate. So through this, we can see that CPC ads or paid ads on Internet Explorer are converting at about 3.8% versus CPC users on Chrome are converting at only about 1.9. I mean, there's only 122 users using IE instead of Chrome, but if we can find a way to target those IE users, that would be a great way to improve our conversions on this particular example. So honestly, if you take nothing else away from this presentation, just know that pivot tables are awesome, and I love pivot tables. And with that, I'll throw it back to Zach.
I really hope you take away more than just pivot tables, but that is in and of itself a really great takeaway. So I'm going to jump into a little more now, kind of the importance of being data-driven with CRO, with those points that you're looking at, and specifically statistical significance data and its significance. I'll be saying that a lot over the next few minutes. So I made this meme a while ago for actually an internal presentation, but I love it because I just love data. Data's my favorite. I live and breathe in data every day. Spreadsheets for days is what I always say. And I also love ELF, and it's really a great reference while we're going through another June here in Phoenix, boiling outside. So statistical significance is super important when running A/B testing and to CRO testing as a whole. So really what statistical significance is looking at is the level of certainty that the results of a given test are not due to sampling error. So for example, if you have a super low amount of viewers and you had 1 conversion on your control and 3 conversions on your variant, it's going to look like you increased your conversion rate by 200%, but that may not be statistically sound. So use statistical significance to kind of work that out and figure that out. So we use a two-tailed Bayesian statistical model. If you don't know what that is, you should go and read my blog post about it, which is going to be, I think, thrown in the chat here of this webinar, as well as linked on the recording of this. But it's important to know whether your test's win or loss is actually significant. And this kind of is used by various numbers of industries to prove whether or not what they're doing is statistically sound. It's incredibly important because a change in conversion rate doesn't necessarily mean that the change was due to the test you're running and the change that you made. We recommend only implementing organic CRO results where statistical significance passes 95%. So that means you are certain that 95% of the time, the change that you saw in conversion rate is due to the change you made in your test and that portion of the site that you are A/B testing. We then say for off-site tests, 90% statistical significance. Again, that's just kind of a difference because of the conversion volume and high intent traffic between on-site versus off-site. But super important to keep in mind and to figure out kind of what percentage points work best for you and your process. So off of that and off of statistical significance, it's super important to talk about CRO test length because it's really important to not have tests that go on forever. You want to be able to iterate, you want to be able to gain value from CRO and from A/B testing. So we always recommend 2 to 8 weeks, and this is again specific to on-site testing. The reason we say 2 weeks is really you kind of need that amount of time for your test to level out and for those results to level out and to actually give you statistically sound data, and then going no longer than 8 weeks because the reality is, as Jeff mentioned, these platforms run on cookies. People delete their cookies all the time. Sometimes they do it on purpose, sometimes they do it by accident. But that happens, and you don't want people to be seeing numerous versions of your site within that short of a period of time, especially if they saw the control and then the variant and then the control again. Kind of that frictioned experience is not ideal. And then, so this can feel like forever, waiting 8 weeks for something that you put live to go on. But it's best to wait. I always say that I feel like Rose from Titanic when I'm waiting for a test to conclude, and I feel like it's been 84 years for some of my tests. But super important to wait the amount of time that's necessary for you to reach statistical significance so that you actually know that the results that you're doing and what you're implementing is sound. So for your convenience, we have actually created a statistical significance calculator, link below. I feel like I'm a YouTube star now. But I'll give you an example here of kind of statistical significance and what that looks like. So let's say you had a control, it got 1,000 visitors in the time that you were running this test and got 8 conversions. So you're looking at a 0.8 0.8% conversion rate for that. Not great, not horrible. And then your variant, you got 1,000 visitors, 17 conversions, so that brought you up to a 1.7 conversion rate. Awesome test, clearly won. You've clearly been doing CRO with vertical measures. So obviously the variant won. There was a 112% change, but more importantly than that, well, 112% is exciting, and it's exciting to have that amount of lift from a test that you're running. Looking at that statistical significance, we reached 96.51%. So it passed that 95% threshold. So we know, we are 96% certain that that change that we made, that 112% change, is true 96% of the time. So it's at the point now where we can implement and move forward and continue to iterate on kind of these results and this test. Definitely recommend taking a look at our calculator and using it for any test that you run, as well as if and when you're doing CRO with vertical measures, check the test that we're running, make sure that what we're telling you is correct. Look at that statistical significance, as well as kind of CRO or A/B testing that you may do with anyone else. So with that, I'm now going to pass it back over to Jeff.
All right, thank you for that, Zach. And when he says pass that over, we're literally passing this clicker back and forth, so it's really relevant.
I want to try throwing it at one point, but I feel like that might be dangerous, so the pass feels best.
Yeah, maybe I'll throw it over to you next. All right, I'll be going over our CRO process. So in the immortal words of Montel Jordan, or maybe not so immortal, this is how we do it. This is how we do it. It's totally fine if nobody knows what that is. I'm old. All right, so we're deciding where and what to test. How do we do that? So we kind of went over those tools a little bit earlier. We're going to go through our analytics data. We're going to comb through that. We're going to use a couple pivot tables. We're going to look at our heat maps. We're going to look at the scroll depth, where users are hovering, where users are clicking. We're going to go through the site, kind of comb through it and pick it apart, because we love Schadenfreude. We really watching the suffering of other people's websites. And we're just going to, in general, do a CRO audit, which ties nicely into our next slide here. So here at VM, Vertical Measures, and Investis Digital Company, our CRO audit is something that we stress is vitally important. We don't recommend doing any testing without doing a CRO audit first. And what that is we just go through your website, we do a technical audit of it, we do a UX audit of it, we do an analytics audit of it, and then we do a user behavior audit of it. And we put that all together and we bundle it up for you in a nice little package so you can read through it. You can talk to us later to find out how to get your own CRO audit. So CRO is a circle or a cycle, and you're always going to be in this cycle. So the first step of that cycle is a hypothesis, which we're going to come up with an if-then statement. So if we do this to your site, then this is going to happen. Usually that then is we're improving your conversion rate. And we're going to write up a document for this. It's going to have that if-then statement. We're going to give some reasoning for why we want to do this test and what we believe will happen. And then we'll send some screenshots of mock-ups of what that test is actually going to do to your site. And we'll put that in a document and we'll send it along. Now, in between here is implementation. So that's always kind of like a little tricky point where we're sweating right as we are getting ready to launch that test, but it usually works out fine.
I always like to take a coffee break after I put a test live. I set it live and go and de-stress for a second.
Yeah, it's very important. You know, we usually have dogs around here. We'll just find one of them, give them some good pets. So after you have implemented, you're going to be tracking that test or monitoring that test. And we're monitoring that test usually every 2 weeks is when we actually have a task for it. But to be honest, we're probably going into that test every day and seeing how it's doing, because it's our little baby. We just want to check in on it. And so we're checking that, and we're looking for statistical significance. So for it to reach that 95% statistical significance. So once it has reached that, we go ahead and we write up a conclusion document. So that conclusion document is going to give you a big old summary of everything that's happening. It's going to have the percent increase or decrease that it lost. It's going to have all the data that's says why that happened and the statistical significance of that test, or stat sig. That's what we've started abbreviating it as, because statistical significance is difficult to say. And then at the end, we're going to recommend future tests, because we're never content. We always want to be testing. And that brings us to that continuous iteration, which is that gray bit that you see going around there. So we are always iterating forever. So we'll give you an example hypothesis here. And we like to pick on people. It's that Schadenfreude thing. So we're based in AZ. So we're going to pick on U-Haul. They're also an Arizona company. They're notoriously behind the times when it comes to design, a bit of an easy target. So sorry, U-Haul, and if there's any U-Haul fanboys out there, we apologize. But I'm just saying, I love those lower decks. U-Haul, you're moving in storage resource, chilling away. All right. So the sample hypothesis that we've come up with here is, if we update the form styling to better capture the user's attention, then the truck and trailer rentals from the homepage will increase. And you'll see a little image of this later. Whoop. Skipped ahead of there a little bit. Our reasoning behind this, and this is kind of a little bit fictional because we don't actually have like their analytics data to dive into, but our reasoning behind this hypothesis is that 100% of visitors are viewing this form because they're landing on the homepage. We theorize that there's a low hover intent over this button, and it's not clear where users' eyes should navigate once you land on this homepage. And here is their homepage, as you can see. So that form just kind of a little kind of blends into everything else. Your eye is really drawn to that 1995, that free month. So our variant that we suggest is adding a background to that form, really kind of blowing it up in size, we're changing that button color. Sometimes we do that. So there's our control, and there's the variant that we suggest for this particular example. So that gives you an example of what a hypothesis might look like that we send over. And with that, I will toss it back to Zach. I'm gonna pass it.
I'm glad I didn't toss it. I'm not a sports person. So now I'm going to go through kind of the value of CRO and what we can really provide here at Vertical Measures and Investis Digital Company. So let's do the maths. Again, we're now based in London, so we say maths now. So let's say your site is getting 300,000 visits per year, and you have a 2% conversion rate from that, which, not horrible. So from that, you're getting 6,000 leads a year and then if you value those leads at $150 a lead, that is $900,000 in revenue. So we say if you do CRO for a year, what we've seen from clients that have done that, going a full year with us and really letting us iterate as much as we can and implement tests and implement our winning variants as soon as we reach statistical significance, we usually see a 40% estimated lift from CRO. There was a typo on the slide originally. It said estimated life, and I really wanted to keep it that way because CRO gives me life. But so if you'd be going from 2% then to a 2.8% conversion rate, and if you're still getting those 300,000 visits per year, that year then from that point on, you would be looking at 8,400 leads. And if you're still valuing those at $150 a lead, because that quality is still stayed the same, you're going to see a jump to 1.26 million in revenue. That is from CRO only. You'd be getting a $360,000 value, which is a huge ROI. And this is even an example that's kind of isolated because there's no change in traffic. Ideally, you'd also already be doing other things with us, such as SEO and content to get that traffic up as well, in which case the return that you would see from CRO would be even bigger because we would still be consistently working on that conversion rate with that increase in visitors as well. So there's my little pitch to you. So, shut up and make me money. Give us your money. Let us do CRO. Let us test for you. We love testing. We love making our clients money and really lifting their conversion rates as much as we can. So again, to make things, this clicker is much harder than you would think. To give you the most value that we can, we have our CRO value forecast calculator live on our site. Link below, I believe, again, YouTube star. This really, you can go in and put in your own website visitors annually, your current conversion rate, your estimated lift from CRO, which again, we see 40% over people who stay with us for a year doing continuous CRO. But if you want to bring that down a little to 20%, make it a little safer, it'll change those calculations for you based on that, as well as your average conversion value. And then it'll spit out kind of on the right the additional value that you'll gain from a year and additional conversions for a year. And that's broken out in kind of your current status, your future estimates, and then that value from CRO. And you can even print your results directly from that page. So kind of to wrap that up and to bring that full circle, we want to give you some example of some of the wins that we've seen from our tests with current clients to show that we're not just talking the talk, we're not giving hypothetical examples, but actual wins that we've seen. So first company, B2B company, we tested changing the CTN design. Sometimes it really is just as simple as button color. And we saw a 130% increase with 99% statistical significance on that page. And again, these are on-site examples. So this is organic traffic on their live site. And then company 2, also B2B, we changed some content messaging. So this was changing some headlines as well as call outs on the page to make it kind of more clear what value was being presented. And we saw a 30% increase in conversion rate with 93.93% statistical significance. So I know I'm a total hypocrite because I said 95% statistical significance or nothing, but it's really important, as Jeff mentioned, we monitor our tests every week and looking at that trend over time. And if you hit that 8-week mark and you're kind of right on the cusp between 90 and 95, we'll still, of course, recommend implementing if we've seen kind of a positive trend over time. And then last one, company 3, a B2C example, we changed their form fills. So this was changing kind of how those form fills were labeled as well as removing a form field. And we saw a 217% increase in conversion rate at 99.99% statistical significance. Again, this was on-site, so organic traffic. These results were so awesome, the client almost didn't believe us, but that's why, of course, we track data like crazy. We always have data to back up all the results we're presenting and everything we're showing, and really shows kind of the huge lift that you can get from CRO. So beyond these on-site examples, also want to show you some off-site examples as well. So company 4, by changing content messaging in their ClickFunnels, so this was actually removing a step kind of from their conversion process and making it 2 steps as opposed to 3, we saw a 60% increase at 97% statistical significance. Company 2, so this kind of calls back to the on-site examples. We, of course, recommend, if you can, with us doing both on-site and off-site testing at the same time. Saw from changing design and content of their form fills, we saw a 24% increase at 92% statistical significance. Again, for off-site, we always recommend going just above 90% statistical significance. I should really start saying stat sig, statistical significance is a mouthful. And then company 3, so this is again a call out to the same company on those on-site examples. By changing simply imagery on one of their landing pages and really learning the best way to speak to that specific audience that we knew was coming to that page, we saw a 406% increase in form fills and in conversions on that page at 99% statistical significance. So shows how really with offsite testing and with knowing the exact audience that's coming to your page and kind of what they are expecting, we can do targeted tests that even something as simple as changing an image to speak to that audience better can have a huge lift in conversion rate. So that kind of wraps everything up nicely from CRO and our stuff, and I'm gonna kick it over to Brad now.
Thank you so much, both of you guys. Thanks, Jeff, for singing This Is How We Do It. Thank you, Zach, for not throwing the clicker. Thank you to all of you for introducing a new term, stat sig, because statistical significance is challenging, to say the least. But I'd also like to thank Kate Guerin, our in-house designer. We take a lot of pride in developing these presentation decks, whether we're doing webinars or we're going to certain events, traveling across the country. Kate and our design team helps build these decks, and I think they're absolutely beautiful. So thank you, Kate. This is a reminder to the listeners that we will be sending out the recording and slides early tomorrow a.m. So if your lunch break is over and you can't get to this Q&A section, check it back in tomorrow morning and it will be there. All right, let's get into the Q&A section. I think we have some good ones. Let's start right away. Question from Anita. What are some of the best ways to convince a client to A/B test if they are not currently doing it or are hesitant? And I would also like an answer about convincing your boss if you're a director of marketing and you're listening to this webinar and you're really excited about CRO. What are some ways to convince them to get started with A/B testing?
All right, yeah, I'll jump in to answer that one. So biggest thing that I would stress with trying to convince someone to start doing CRO is to go to that value forecast calculator, put in your own metrics, and really get a better idea of the possible return that you could be getting from CRO, as well as that possible lift in conversion rate. But beyond that, if those numbers and those metrics aren't enough, even if you take it to like a really safe lift, down to like 10% lift in conversion rate, if that still isn't enough to persuade and to begin A/B testing, I would totally recommend having us do the CRO audit that Jeff spoke about. That's kind of 1 month of work with CRO, and doing that is a really successful way to show the value and to really highlight where we would test and what we would test to experience that possible lift.
Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing to add. Zach kind of covered everything there. Stole my thunder with that CRO audit.
Sorry, rough.
I just love those
All
CRO.
right. That's fine. That's a great answer. So moving on, I'm going to bucket two questions together. This one is from Kyle and Ben Holland. Ben Holland has been a fan of Vertical Measures and a former employee of ours for quite a few years. Kyle's question is, what is the best way to keep a running log of your CRO tests and results? They're currently using a spreadsheet. And Ben asks if we utilize Google Data Studio at all for reporting or analysis of our A/B tests.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, I mean, we also use a spreadsheet. They come in handy. They're easy to use, but we use that spreadsheet to actually fill out a Google Data Studio dashboard. So all of our clients get a nice little dashboard that has all their like ongoing efforts, and CRO is one of those. And we'll usually have, you know, your year-to-year performance for CRO. We'll have graphs showing you how all of your tests have performed. We'll have links to each of the hypotheses and conclusions for all of those. So yeah, we're big on Data Studio.
So actually, I kind of wanted to ask a curveball question. I believe CRO works. I've seen it work for our company. I've seen it work for all of our clients. I'm a true believer. But what happens if you never reach that statistical significance that you guys were so proudly boasting about?
So yeah, I mean, if you have an instance where you keep testing test after test after test and you can't reach that statistical significance, I would mention I'm a huge advocate for, again, with that tracking, being able to check on that test at the very least weekly, and pushing for what your statistical significance at that time is, and to look at the trend of that over time. Because even if you can't reach 90, you can still track it trending positively over those 8 weeks that you're running that test. As well as, I think not reaching statistical significance speaks to the need to do something similar to our CRO audit and figure out where on your site is the best place to test, where has the most viewers, where is the highest conversion point, and also not reaching statistical significance is speaking to the changes that you're making and what you're testing. You might need to make those more drastic.
Yeah.
So let's say then I have a landing page that isn't converting well. What should be the first thing that I look for? What do you guys look for first?
So the first thing that I do is usually dive into that data, do that deep dive. Am I reporting on that conversion correctly? Because that could be the case. You know, it could be the case that you are not correctly reporting that data. Another thing to look at is what type of traffic is going to that page. That could be something to look at. Zach, you want to get anything else?
Yeah, beyond that, within your heat mapping, look at really how live actual users who are going there are interacting, how low are they scrolling, what are some of the friction points, as well as if you're using one of the better heat mapping tools, looking at those session recordings I find is super useful. You can usually set like a goal URL for, if they look at this page, let me view their recording, and it holds on to all of those recordings from the past months. So if you have especially a specific landing page that isn't converting, looking at those recordings and the actual like live, how people are interacting with that page, maybe what it is that they're hovering over that then makes them bounce, can be super useful.
So for the newbies out there just becoming introduced to CRO, what's some big misconceptions about the whole process that you want to dispel right now?
So one that I always see is that people think they can jump right into testing without doing any sort of audit. And it's kind of a no-no. I can't really test your site without knowing how it's currently performing.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a huge misconception. And then, of course, the one I presented that lengthy slide on, that it's more than just button color. We're not just changing the color of something and calling it a day and running a bunch of tests on that color, but actually looking at things holistically and changing various portions of a page for tests.
Yeah, you can do some pretty intense stuff with some of these CRO testing tools. You can add whole chunks of HTML and JavaScript into a site. You can remove whole chunks. You can do some big things other than just changing a button color.
All right, I want to thank you both again. We have one more question, and this should be a nice sign-off. What's the one thing CROs should always do, and what's the one thing CROs should never do?
I'll take the always, I guess. You should always, always, always be iterating, always thinking of how you can be better, never treating it as a one and done solution, just constant iteration. And then I guess never as well, never make dataless decisions. Never make a decision that isn't backed in data and that there isn't a metric that you can point to of why we should be testing this, whether that's, quantitative or qualitative data, still just having something that backs what you're changing. While your gut can be a good thing to follow, you should have data along with that always.
Yeah, and to just drive the point home even more, never not be iterating.
That's great. Thank you, guys. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again to Zach and Jeff for presenting another great webinar. We're actually taking July off, so everyone can enjoy the summer vacations, but be ready. We're going to be coming back in August with another great webinar. We'll be sending out the promotion and newsletters out for that soon. Until then, I'm Brad from Investus Digital. Have a happy and safe 4th of July weekend. Thanks, guys.